Well, good morning, folks. It's a brisk October morn out there, just perfect for a walk through the cemetery or a last-minute trip to the local pumpkin patch. And it's not just any October day, no siree, 'cause today is Halloween. Yes, All Hallows Eve, or Samhain, the old Gaelic festival marking the end of the harvest season and the thinning of the veil between the living and the dead. In the festive spirit of the occasion, I'd like to read to you an excerpt from my favorite story to read on this spooky day, The Legend of Sleepy Hollow by Washington Irving. Ah, hit away with a yarn, that Mr. Irving. Of the little village of Sleepy Hollow, he writes, "It is remarkable that a visionary propensity I have mentioned is not confined to the native inhabitants of the valley, but is unconsciously imbibed by everyone who resides there for a time. However wide awake they may seem before they enter that sleepy region, they are sure in a little time to inhale the witching influence of the air and begin to grow imaginative, to dream dreams and see apparitions. And folks, I'd say that's just the sort of bewitching spirit I wish upon us all this day, to let go of the daily mundane thinking that follows us all year, and to turn our minds to the childlike thoughts of ghosts, witches, and goblins. Allow yourself to hear the things that go bump in the night, and you might be surprised by the sounds. We're just about to leave you alone with the vintage melodies of Halloween yesterdays. But before that, let me give you one last warning for tonight. To wear a costume, never blow out a jack-o'-lantern, and always check your candy."
So it is a gloomy, spooky, but cozy and beautiful Halloween. And today I'm going to be ranking and reviewing every horror movie that I watched over the last month, October 2023. Of course, this list is not going to include the movies that I watched today, but those are all going to be rewatches, and this list is all about discoveries. Horror movies that I watched for the first time, or that I just watched for the first time on a new Blu-ray or 4K release. How's it going, everyone? Welcome again to the Cobwebs channel. My name is Daniel, and I do these videos at the end of every month, ranking all the Blu-rays I watched over the last month. But this is going to be a little bit special because it's going to include everything. Blu-rays, movies that I watched in theaters, movies that I watched at home on streaming, everything that I watched for the first time, either the movie itself or the Blu-ray release, we're going to be talking about today. And we got 27 movies to talk about, and I guess we better get started because I want to get finished with this video before the trick-or-treaters start showing up. So showing up at the bottom of the list, number 27, is a movie that I actually saw at a 24-hour marathon that I attended in Chicago over the past month. If you're curious about that, I made a whole vlog video about it that's on my channel right now. And this movie is called Demon Witch Child. It's from 1975. It's a Spanish horror film, and basically it's kind of an Exorcist ripoff, except instead of the little girl getting possessed by a demon, she gets possessed by the ghost of a witch. So she doesn't exactly get like bedridden like Reagan in The Exorcist does. She's going about her life just turning more and more evil and saying a lot of horrible and obscene things. And that's where most of the bonkersness comes from in this movie, because it's definitely a bonkers, weird movie. It's just a child saying a lot of horrible, horrible things. It's silly, it's goofy, and I feel a little bad putting it at the bottom of the list because honestly, I saw it in the middle of the night. I was barely awake because it was a 24-hour marathon, and they showed it on original 35mm print, and it looked horrible. It was in such bad shape. Now, the guy who introduced the movie actually said that there is a boutique label, I don't know which one, but there is a Blu-ray label out there that is currently restoring the movie, so we will get a Blu-ray release of this before too long. And I honestly might pick it up because I'm curious what it looks like, how it's supposed to look. But as it is, it's not a very good movie, and it wasn't a very good presentation. I'm putting it at number 27. At number 26 is a movie that maybe shouldn't be on the list because of the whole first discovery rule I have, because I did see this for the first time when I was a kid and it traumatized me, and I rewatched it because I did a video on the top movies that scared me throughout my life. But the rewatch was after so many years, it almost felt like a first time watch, and it turns out my memory of the scary things weren't even totally accurate. This is Godsend from 2004. Godsend is a movie about Greg Kinnear and Rebecca Romijn, scene, and they are two parents who lose their young son. I think he's like 8 years old, and it's absolutely devastating. And they get approached by an experimental doctor, played by Robert De Niro, who tells them that he can clone their son so they can have him back again. And he does it. He implants the fetus into the mother. She grows him in her belly, gives birth to him. They raise him all over again. It's the same kid. But once he gets past the point where he died the first time, he starts to change and things get creepy. It's a pretty good premise. It's essentially Pet Sematary, except with a more scientific approach rather than folk horror. It's just not a terribly great movie. I mean, it seems classy because it's got a good cast and it's very competently made. Greg Kinnear and Robert De Niro probably give better performances here than the movie really deserves. But all of the horror is pretty light and unoriginal. There's not much that interesting going on here with this movie. To my adult eyes, it's not that great, but I can't take away how much it scared me when I was a little kid. At number 25 is the first movie I saw at the 24-hour marathon I went to, and that is The Fall of the House of Usher from 1928, a French silent film version of the classic Edgar Allan Poe story. But I know it incorporates another Poe story, something about a painting. I can't remember what it's called off the top of my head. And look, the honest fact of the matter is I do struggle with a lot of silent horror films. I'm just starting to get a little bit more into silent movies, but it's definitely the comedies that I gravitate to more. The horror movies tend to feel very slow to me, with the exception of Nosferatu, and this one definitely did too. One thing that kind of bugs me about some silent movies, and it's very present in this, is you'll watch characters talk for a long time, and of course you don't hear the dialogue because it's a silent film, and then either no text card will come up or a short little text card will with like maybe one line, and I'm just left wondering, well, what are they talking about? It's just something that kind of bothers me as someone who really loves dialogue. To people who love silent movies, I probably sound really stupid right now, so I should just stop talking. But I thought it was well made, very beautiful on a visual level. It had some really good spooky time atmosphere, but for sure, I just can't put it any higher due to enjoyment level. At number 24 is a brand new movie. This is Five Nights at Freddy's from 2023. I wasn't planning on seeing this because I wasn't going to go out to the theater to see it. I hardly ever go to the theater these days, to be honest with you. But I found out that this went straight to Peacock the same day it went to theaters. I was very surprised about that. But I have Peacock, so I thought, hey, I can watch it for free at home, watch it with my wife. Let's do this thing. And apparently it's based on a video game. If I didn't hear people talking about that online, I don't know if I even would have known that. I had known nothing about the video game. But essentially what it is it stars Josh Hutcherson, who I'm used to seeing as a child actor. So it's interesting to see him now as an adult. And he's struggling to raise his young sister. The parents are out of the picture. And as a last resort, he gets a job as a security guard at an old broken down Chuck E. Cheese type pizza place called Freddys. Apparently this place was big in the 80s. It had been closed down, but the owner doesn't want to let the building go. So he hires security guards to keep it up and make sure it stays in good condition. So he's doing this job and he finds out that the animatronic animal robots are possessed by ghosts, and things go on from there. Now, the movie is definitely okay. I can't call it any better than that. It kind of felt like a movie where the point of the movie is, if you're a fan of the game, now you get to see these characters in a live action film. That just kind of felt like that's where the main appeal is. And that wasn't a main appeal for me. So the animatronic robots, they weren't that cool to me. They weren't creepy. Nothing about the horror really worked for me in this film. And I understand. I think it's mostly made for kids, even though it is kind of violent. I think the game is geared towards children, so that's my guess here. It's PG-13. But there are some good performances in here, like from Josh Hutcherson and from Matthew Lillard. There's a good mystery going on with the backstory and what's going on with Josh Hutcherson's character, what he's after. I've heard some people complaining about that, just wanting more of the animatronics. But honestly, I found that more interesting than any of the horror stuff going on, so I was totally okay with that. I think the movie is fine, well made enough, but no better than that. This thing is okay. Nowhere near one of the modern horror movies that you need to check out. All right, at number 23, we're finally getting into some physical media with the Brainiac. This was included in Indicator's Mexico Macabre box set. My last video on the channel is actually on this box set, and I absolutely love it. It was a pretty in-depth review because I was so excited. But the Brainiac kicks off in the 1660s with a man being condemned by a court for witchcraft. And he gets burned at the stake, but he vows that he will return one day and kill the ancestors of the people that burned him. And he does in the 1960s, so this film ends up not being a period piece because that's when the movie came out. And he returns to Earth, takes human form, and goes around seducing women and then killing them as well as the man that they're with. That seems how it always seems to go. But right before he kills them, he turns into a frightening monster, which you can see the design of right there. Very silly, goofy kind of a monster, not looking real at all, but in a very just kind of Halloween-y fun way that I really enjoyed. And that's the best thing about the movie is the monster himself. The story, there's really not much going on here. The guy seduces a woman, kills them, rinse, repeat over and over again. But still, a pretty fun 1960s monster movie. I just can't complain about that. At number 22, we've got Ozone, which is another movie that I saw at the marathon. This is a 1993 shot on video, straight to VHS horror movie, almost action horror movie, you might say. And that sounds very much not up my alley, not my thing. I was kind of worried about watching this, but it won me over. And that's always special when you watch a movie that's not really your thing, but you still get into it. Ozone is about a cop who is investigating the disappearance of his partner, and he stumbles onto this cult of these people that do a drug called ozone. And when they do it, it turns them into these grotesque, bubbling monsters, all led by this cult leader who is the grossest looking monster of them all. This movie had extremely little resources. It's very low budget, but they kept finding ways to entertain me, and I gotta respect that. Almost feels like all the resources of the movie were going into special effects. There's so many practical effects, just big crazy stuff that I was just very entertained by. Like I said, this movie's not my thing, but I still definitely had a good time. At number 21, we've got another black and white 60s film, but this time an American one. This is The Leech Woman from 1960. So I didn't end up putting in an order with Scream Factory's Shocktober sale. I almost did, but I didn't go through with it. But this is one movie I had in my cart. And when I stayed over at my friend Chris's house in Chicago when we went to the marathon, one morning I woke up way earlier than him and he had this on Blu-ray, so I popped it in. And The Leech Woman is about a middle-aged couple who kind of hates each other. They're very at odds. Seems like the scientist husband is a huge jerk and the wife has become an alcoholic and they have this contentious relationship. But the husband stumbles onto a secret that allows for eternal youth, something that will turn women specifically young again. And he knows he can make so much money off of this. So he takes his wife, travels to Africa, to this African tribe, in order to get the plant substance that will allow this secret to work. And some things happen I don't want to spoil, but the wife ends up going through with this, who's played by Colleen Gray, by the way. She's the female lead from Nightmare Alley. So cool to see her. And she becomes young again, which honestly isn't much of a change because she's just like middle-aged and they just put a little bit of makeup on her to make her look a little older. It's not a very dramatic change for sure. She's pretty much beautiful either way. And it turns out this fix is temporary, and in order to keep doing it, she has to kill men. So she becomes a leech woman where she seduces men, kills them, gets young again. But every time she turns old again, she gets older and more grotesque looking, you might say, with all the makeup that they put on her. It's a pretty fun movie, a fun 1960s black and white B movie. And I also want to shout out Estelle Hemsley, who plays the woman who brings them back to her African tribe to get the secret. She was very good and definitely led an authenticity to the story. At number 20, we've got a William Castle horror movie called Straight Jacket. This is starring Joan Crawford. And this is a double feature Blu-ray pack that I have from Mill Creek. I think it's kind of funny that it's called, what is it? Psycho Biddy double feature. So ridiculous. I didn't watch this second movie yet, but Straight Jacket's the one that I checked out. Directed by William Castle, and essentially the story is Joan Crawford discovers that her husband is cheating on her, and when she does, in a rage, she axe murders them. There you can see her with an axe. And the movie then cuts to years later where she's finally let out of the mental institution to go be free. And she gets to reunite with her daughter, who was just a little kid when this event happened, who she finally gets to see again for the first time and form a relationship with her. And Joan Crawford, she's like so much better than you would think this movie deserves. I just really respect that she took this kind of schlocky William Castle horror movie with way over the top violence for the 1960s. I mean, there's even an axe decapitation in this. Very impressed by that for sure. But Joan Crawford takes the material very seriously. She's excellent in the movie. And it ends up becoming a mystery as the axe murders start happening again. And we don't quite know, is Joan Crawford going insane? Is she doing it? Or is it something else? I kind of thought that I knew where the movie was going and that it was kind of predictable, but I turned out to be wrong. And I really liked the end of the movie. The movie's not perfect. It's definitely slow at times, but it definitely builds to a fantastic conclusion. conclusion that I didn't see coming. And I also got to shout out a early performance from a young George Kennedy. Very good in this movie. Very fun. At number 19 is one of those 90s post-Scream teen horror movies that I had never seen before. And I checked this out on Amazon Prime. This is Disturbing Behavior from 1998. So this is starring James Marsden as a teenager. You have to kind of suspend your disbelief there, but we go with it. Who moves to this small Pacific Northwest town with his family. Turns out he had recently lost his brother, so the family is going through that tragedy. But he kind of hooks up with a gang of outcasts at the school, including Katie Holmes and Nick Stahl. And it turns out they're outcasts because the popular kids are super weird and creepy. They're very cardboard cut out. They seem to have come right out of the 1950s. But it also turns out that they're not quite as squeaky clean as they seem, because they periodically go through these rage-filled tantrums where they attack and kill people. And we come to find out they do this when they get horny. So the plot of the movie is essentially the popular kids, almost seem like Invasion of the Body Snatchers kind of people, we don't quite know what's going on, who attack and kill people whenever they get horny. It's very ridiculous premise. I just want to imagine like some writer in a boardroom at a studio pitching this idea, and they're like, yes, this is a great idea. Let's definitely go through with it. It's a ridiculous movie. It is so dated. It is so late 90s in every way. Fashions, the music, the slang. Katie Holmes keeps calling things razor, like that's so razor. I'd never even heard that before. I thought it was so funny, but I love all that. I really appreciate movies as time capsules, and this movie very much is one. But then it's got the ridiculous premise, the over-the-top violence, and it's actually a really good supporting cast, including Bruce Greenwood, who's kind of hot right now in the horror community because he's the star of Mike Flanagan's House of Usher series, and William Sadler. This is one of my favorite William Sadler performances, just so over the top. I really enjoyed Disturbing Behavior. It was, not great, but a lot of fun. Back to some physical media. At number 18, we've got my Scream Factory Blu-ray of The House That Screamed. This is a Spanish horror film from 1970, and apparently it was something of an influence on Suspiria, which definitely intrigued me about it. It takes place at an all-girls boarding school. Girls who keep getting into trouble and need someone to whip them into shape, and that someone happens to be the headmistress there, who's very hard and harsh, but believes she has to do that to keep these girls in line. And we follow a shy girl who comes in, and it seems she's there because her mother had some trouble and can't take care of her anymore. And a lot of the movie is just kind of going through the drama going on at this school. There's actually not a lot of horror content in the movie, which was a little bit disappointing to me. There are some murders going on through the movie. Someone is killing girls one by one, but we see very little of it. Most of it's mostly off screen. Again, a little bit disappointing to me, but the atmosphere of the movie is phenomenal. Great, like dark academia vibes, very gloomy Gothic, and antiques everywhere. Very cool atmosphere. And kind of like Straitjacket, this is a movie that I thought would be very predictable, and I kind of saw where it was going. And I wasn't entirely wrong, but there's a lot more to the twist than I expected that honestly was really cool. Very unexpected, very cool ending. However, there is a theatrical cut and an extended version, and I watched the theatrical cut. So if there's a lot better, cooler kind of horror content in the extended version, and you know about it, let me know down in the comments below. There were several pairs in this list that I had trouble deciding between, and this and Island of Terror were just such a pair, but I went with my number 17, Island of Terror, to be the one over it, because I think it's the one that I would rewatch sooner. Island of Terror is a super cozy British horror film that I really enjoyed a lot. It's directed by Terence Fisher, who did a lot of the classic Hammer films like Horror of Dracula, Curse of Frankenstein, and starring Peter Cushing, but it's actually not a Hammer movie. It is about a group of British doctors, so many British doctors in this movie, who discover a dead body that doesn't have any bones. And they're like, this is very weird. How is there a dead body that's missing all of its bones and there's no blood or anything like that? And solving this mystery leads them to an island of terror, and they discover that there are these green goo blob creatures all around the island that attack you and suck your bones out, essentially. And they're so silly looking, so ridiculous and fake looking, but in a way I found super charming. And I found this movie really relaxing in a great way. The island it takes place on has great, cozy, autumnal atmosphere, like the British countryside kind of a thing. I like the performances from the actors. There's a female lead in here who I recognize from Curse of the Fly, which is a 60s movie that I absolutely love. And by the end, it almost becomes like this big set piece siege movie, which I was pretty impressed by. It got a lot bigger than I thought it was going to. Fun movie. I really enjoyed Island of Terror. At number 16, we got a brand new movie release that I liked a lot more than it seems like most people do, and that is Haunted Mansion from 2023, Disney's Haunted Mansion. Now, I am a huge fan of the Haunted Mansion property. I love the ride so much. I love amusement parks, and the Haunted Mansion ride at Disneyland and Disney World, it's my favorite amusement park ride ever. I love it so much. Just the really just fun, childlike wonder of the haunted house atmosphere of it makes me so happy. And I'm actually a big fan of the 2003 film with Eddie Murphy. It came out at the perfect time for me. I'm very nostalgic about it, and I find it just so fun and rewatchable. It's a movie I just love to put on for the atmosphere of it. And I love everything about the Haunted Mansion iconography, the hatbox ghost, the hitchhiking ghost. Man, it's so perfect for me. It makes me so happy. The singing heads. Oh, it's all so great. And this movie came out in theaters in July, did not do well at all, but it hit Disney Plus here in October, and I checked it out on Disney Plus. And I thought it was pretty good. It tells a much more interesting and more heartfelt story than I expected for a Haunted Mansion movie. It all centers on Lakeith Stanfield. He just recently lost his wife and he's kind of struggling through that. And he gets roped in by this mother played by Rosario Dawson and her son to try to solve the hauntedness at their haunted mansion. And Lakeith Stanfield, he almost seems like he thinks he can get an Oscar out of a Haunted Mansion movie. Like, it's a Haunted Mansion movie, and he's giving it his all, as much as he's given to like any other role he's ever done. I'm a big fan of him as an actor. I thought he was excellent in this movie. Absolutely excellent. However, this is a movie that I think would be much better if it had like a quarter of the budget. It's very high budget, it's CGI packed, and it doesn't need it. It doesn't need it at all. I think that's true with a lot of Disney movies recently. They pump so much money into it, there's so much CGI, and they look like crap. Haunted Mansion doesn't look like crap, not like some recent Marvel movies had, but I don't think it looks as good as the 2003 film did. I think the 2003 film has better atmosphere. I like the look of a lot of the ghosts better. And I just think it's just a light, fun, short little movie that I would put on more. This movie's too long, too full of CGI, but I still love the Haunted Mansion iconography. The Hatbox Ghost looks great. He's a great villain. I'm a fan of this movie. It's very autumnal. It's one I could definitely see going back year after year around this season. At number 15, we've got The Terror of Hallows' Eve, a movie I did not expect to be as good as it was. This is from 2017, just a little direct-to-video movie, but I thought it was very good. I put it on my list of my top 10 Halloween movies you might not have heard of. This tells the story of a young boy, I think he's around 14 years old, and he gets brutally beaten up by some bullies, like really beaten up, and he bleeds onto a pumpkin while wishing for revenge. And his wish is granted when a jester-like spirit appears to him called the Trickster and promises to get that revenge for him. And there are these collection of ghosts and spirits, creepy things that attack and kill his bullies one by one. It's kind of like a Pumpkinhead type story, except he's getting revenge for a much smaller thing than in Pumpkinhead. Not that there's anything, you don't beat people up. There's nothing good about that. But I was just impressed by how dark and violent this movie is, because it feels like a kid's small town horror movie. It's about a kid, but it's pretty brutal. And the contrast of those two things I thought was pretty cool and made this movie pretty unique. For a low budget movie, I thought it looked really good and I really enjoyed it. It's a good Halloween time movie for sure. At number 14 is a Vinegar Syndrome release of Moon of the Wolf. Now, I just got to shout you guys out because I put out a video this month on my top 15 werewolf movies. And this is a movie that in the comments, a lot of you recommended to me. And I really appreciate that because I never heard of the movie before you're pointing it out. And I got this Blu-ray at the actual Vinegar Syndrome table when I was at the marathon in Chicago. Felt very cool to just buy directly from them in person. And I really, really like this movie. It's a 70s TV movie. It's a VSA release, a really fancy release that I was very impressed by. And essentially the movie is about a small town sheriff played by David Jansen, who apparently is from the TV version of The Fugitive. And he is investigating murders. And essentially this movie is a really cozy murder mystery that happens to have a werewolf. And I knew going in the murderer was going to be a werewolf, but I didn't know who it would be. And that's kind of where the mystery comes in. And I just found it a great small town mystery. It feels so authentic. It was shot on location in a small Louisiana town. You really feel that authenticity. All the actors feel like that. I really enjoyed them. It's got Barbara Rush in here, who I know as the incredibly gorgeous woman from It Came from Outer Space. And here 20 years later, she's still absolutely gorgeous. And I just think it's wild that I can own this 70s TV movie and this awesome Blu-ray edition that costs $30. And it's got a poster too. Like, I now have a poster for Moon of the Wolf. I mean, check this thing out. Like, how freaking cool is that? But you probably also want to know how the werewolf is. Pretty good. Essentially like a lower rent version of Lon Chaney's The Wolfman. It's very much the look they're going for, but definitely not as cool. My biggest complaint with the werewolf is he's wearing very light clothes, light khaki pants, a light button-up shirt. I think a werewolf should wear darker clothes, but hey, that's just me. At number 13, another movie from the Mexico Macabre box set. This is The Curse of the Crying Woman, which is a La Llorona story. La Llorona is a very famous Mexican ghost story, Mexican legend, which was also the basis for a Conjuring movie called The Curse of La Llorona. And this one is about a recently married couple who go to visit the wife's aunt. And it turns out the aunt is kind of a witch who is in contact with the spirit of La Llorona, has La Llorona's corpse in her basement. And she periodically gets possessed by La Llorona, goes out and kills people, and she's trying to raise her back to life. The mythology of the movie is a little bit confusing, but the atmosphere of it is off the charts great. Super spooky, gothic. It's got a monster in there, and it's got ghosts. And I just could not love the atmosphere of this movie more. It was a really fun, spooky Halloween time. I just love that box set so much. Okay, at number 12, we've got Fun Size, which is definitely a movie I'd seen before, but I watched it on Blu-ray for the first time this year. Very disappointed in the Blu-ray release though, because it doesn't make it look like a Halloween movie at all, and it totally is. This movie is a silly teen comedy that happens to take place on Halloween night. It's got Halloween atmosphere everywhere, which I really enjoyed. The two main stars, Victoria Justice and Jane Levy, are on their way to a Halloween party, and they're taking Victoria Justice's little brother trick-or-treating. They lose him while trick-or-treating and have to go out on this one crazy night adventure to try to rescue him. Sometimes people in the comments get mad at me when I praise kids movies, like, oh, this is just a kiddie list. But I'm sorry, I like kids horror movies, kids Halloween movies. This movie kind of reminds me of like Can't Hardly Wait in terms of the tone and the silliness of a lot of the jokes. And I enjoy it a lot for that. And it's got so much Halloween stuff. It's a tradition for my wife and I. We watch this every year. And I enjoy that tradition. I enjoy this movie. Okay, at number 11, we have got The Convent from 2000, directed by Mike Mendez. I checked this out at the marathon that I attended in Chicago. And The Convent is essentially Night of the Demons. It's about a group of college students who break into a spooky old convent that's supposedly haunted because of this curse, this town legend on it. And they find that it is indeed haunted. And one by one, they start getting killed and possessed by the ghost of these nuns that turn into these horrific demons. It's very fun. It starts out incredibly high energy and sustains that the whole way. Very funny, very fun. I enjoyed it a lot. It doesn't have an original bone in its body, but I really enjoyed it. It's got Adrienne Barbeau as a tough woman with a shotgun. That's really fun. My one big criticism with the movie is it starts out with two girls who are clearly the main characters, and one of them is very fun, funny, charismatic, got a really great movie star energy to her, and the other one's boring. And the movie has the wrong final girl. It ends up following the wrong girl, and that was disappointing to me because there was a clear right way to go of who your protagonist is, and they didn't go that way. Disappointing to me for sure. Cracking into the top 10 is another brand new movie. This recently premiered at Fantastic Fest, but then it went straight to Amazon Prime Video. So I checked it out there. This is totally killer. Essentially, the premise of this movie is very easy to explain. It's Back to the Future, but with a slasher. The main teenage girl, played by Kieran Shipka, who I know and love from The Blackcoat's Daughter and Sabrina the Teenage Witch. I think she's fantastic. Her mother dealt with a slasher killer in their town back in the 80s. And the killer comes back and finishes the job by killing her mother. So through some way too convenient, but also don't think about it too much ways, Kieran Shipka travels back in time to the 80s to try to stop the killer back then so that the killer can never kill her mom. And she ends up becoming friends with her mom when she was a kid. It's very Back to the Future. This is another movie that kind of doesn't have an original bone in its body because it's so dependent on Back to the Future. And that's my biggest complaint with the movie. They're even talking about Back to the Future all through it. I mean, this movie doesn't exist without that. And I thought it did that worse than, say, Happy Death Day, which is clearly what they're trying to ape the success of. Happy Death Day was dependent on Groundhog Day and was homaging that. But they didn't talk about Groundhog Day much, and it still felt like its own thing. Totally Killer is much less its own thing. But even so, it's really fun, really funny. I would say it's almost more of a comedy first and a horror movie second, but that's okay with me. The mystery is good. There's some good kills in here and a lot of good comedy involving like the difference between young people today and young people in the 80s in terms of like what's acceptable then and what is acceptable now. They dealt with that in a really good and funny way, I thought, which I really enjoyed. I think Totally Killer is a good time. It's also a Halloween movie, so it's a good movie to watch during the Halloween season. At number 9 is sadly the only time I went to the theater this month, except for the marathon that I did. And this is A Haunting in Venice from 2023. This is the new film in Kenneth Branagh's series of Agatha Christie Hercule Poirot adaptations. And I've seen the other two in theaters, Murder on the Orient Express, Death on the Nile. I thought they were both okay. I wasn't a huge fan of either one, but I really respect that that Kenneth Branagh is doing this because he is adapting these classic murder mysteries. And there is no attempt to update these for a modern audience, to modernize them at all. He's just doing adaptions. I'm not saying they're completely faithful because I haven't read any Agatha Christie books personally, but just they feel very classic, and there's no modernness kind of creeping in to compromise the feel of the period piece-ness of it. I don't know if that makes any sense, but I really appreciate that he's making these movies, and no matter what I think of them, I hope he keeps making them. But this one is easily my favorite. This, they take that murder mystery, but they make it a Halloween horror movie. It takes place on Halloween night, and it's not a modern kind of Halloween. It's a very, very vintage feeling Halloween in every way when it comes to the costumes and the music. Man, I just really appreciated just how committed it is to being very vintage. And Kenneth Branagh is Hercule Poirot. He ends up getting invited to this Halloween party where they do a seance to contact the dead, and murders happen. And he's got to solve the mystery and also got to solve, are ghosts real or are they not? And I really appreciated how they handled that. Are there ghosts in this Hercule Poirot universe or not? I really like this movie. It's, again, I'm going to say this word again. I'm sorry. It's so cozy. Also, the reveal of the mystery, not predictable at all. I did not see it coming, and it was very satisfying. At number 8, we've got Daughters of Darkness from 1971, a movie that I've always meant to see and finally got around to it. This is about a young couple on their honeymoon. It's clear that the girl is much lower class than the guy, and he comes from this high-class family. So they're keeping their marriage a secret, which is a source of tension in the relationship because she doesn't want to keep it a secret. They're on their honeymoon. They go to this fancy hotel, and there they meet Countess Bathory. And she is played by, I hope I pronounced this right, Delphine Seyrig. I'm sorry if I got that wrong. I tried. Her performance is so awesome. Like, she is just unbelievably charismatic and alluring and spooky and eerie. And it turns out she's basically a vampire. This is a vampire movie. It's based on what I always thought was the story of Elizabeth Bathory. I don't know if I've always had it wrong about it being Bathory, or they just pronounce it Bathory in this, and it's a way to differentiate it. I don't know, but she's Countess Bathory in this, which is a story of a woman who kills other women, drinks their blood or bathes in their blood in order to remain young forever. So basically a vampire story, although a little bit of a twist on it. And it's a lesbian vampire story, which was very popular in the 70s, particularly overseas. And I thought this movie was excellent. I thought it was visually incredible, had that amazing lead performance from the vampire. It's a very sexy movie, actually, which I've seen 70s movies that feel like they're going for that, and I don't think it works out, but I think it worked out in this movie. And my only complaint with it, why I don't completely love it, is the vampire iconography, the visual vampire motifs you expect to see in a 70s vampire movie. You get very little, hardly any of it. This movie plays it all very realistically and low-key, and I think I would have liked more full-out vampire-ness, but it's doing something different, and I still appreciate this. Daughters of Darkness still definitely comes in at the top 10. I really enjoyed it. At number 7 is the scariest movie I watched this month, and that is Wreck from 2007, a Spanish found footage horror film. This is about a low-tier overnight news crew who goes into a fire station to do a story on the firefighters. The firefighters get called into a building to solve a problem, and they go along with them, and it turns out there is a zombie problem in this building. They lock down the apartment building, and now you're stuck in there with the news crew, the firefighters, and all of the people that live there, trying to figure out what's going on and how to survive this outbreak of a zombie virus. Look, zombie movies, they're not always scary, but this one is very scary, extremely intense. You know, at first I wasn't so sure about this movie because it doesn't have a ton going on when it comes to plot and characters. It's very much just putting you in the POV of a horrible, terrifying situation. But as the tension builds and builds and builds, I was super impressed by the film. Look, the scariest movie is down here at number 7 because I don't completely go to horror films to get scared. I go for atmosphere, for imagination, for just the macabreness of it all. And just because a movie is the scariest doesn't necessarily mean it's the best for me, but it's a really good movie. And I put it at number 7, scariest movie I saw this month. At number 6 is The Witch's Mirror from 1962, another film that I saw as part of the Mexico Macabre box set. And The Witch's Mirror is awesome. It starts out as a witch film, kind of becomes a haunted house film as the witch's revenge, because she's getting revenge for the death of her goddaughter. And it turns into a haunted house film as her revenge is taking place. Then it kind of becomes an Eyes Without a Face riff. It moves through kind of subgenres really smoothly and really well. And the gothic, macabre, Halloween-y atmosphere is just off the charts. I absolutely loved The Witch's Mirror. At number 5, we've got House of Dark Shadows from 1970, another 70s vampire movie. This is by Dan Curtis, who was behind the Dark Shadows TV series. And I kind of grew up on the Dark Shadows series, but it's super long. I certainly haven't seen it all. I saw bits and pieces, but I was very much, I loved Barnabas Collins, and I loved his look of like the weird hair he's got, his wolf cane, his particular kind of coat he has. I always thought he had a fantastic look, and I always wanted a Barnabas Collins costume. Was never able to get it though. Yes, I was a little kid who wanted a suit and a fancy coat and a wolf cane just so I could act like a 70s vampire. But essentially, House of Dark Shadows is the movie version of the show. I was a little worried I wouldn't totally understand it, not seeing all the show, but that is not the case. This movie recreates a lot of the events of the show and just kind of fast forwards through them. So it starts out with Barnabas Collins being resurrected out of his coffin, just like in the TV show. He reintegrates himself into the Collins family and, tries to romance a woman who is the reincarnated version of his lost love, Josette. So it's the events of the show, very much in fast motion. The movie moves super quickly, and I think it has pacing issues because sometimes it kind of feels like it's just zooming through events. But as an atmospheric vampire movie, I loved it. I loved living in this movie. I love Jonathan Frid as Barnabas Collins, love his performance, everything about him. And I just love to live in this, to just bask in House of Dark Shadows. And I thought it was awesome. I don't even know what else to say except I was in gothic vampire heaven watching this movie. At number 4 is The Exorcist 3. Yes, I never got around to going to see Exorcist Believer in the theaters. The reviews weren't very encouraging to try to get me to go. But I did rewatch The Exorcist 3. I've seen it before, but never on the Scream Factory Blu-ray actually. So it's my first time checking this out. Looks great on Blu-ray. What can you say? This is a really, really good movie. It might even be my favorite Exorcist movie. But it was a bit of a disappointing rewatch because I remembered this movie from my first watch a few years ago being very scary. Like it scared me in a really good way because I like being scared by horror movies. And I didn't find it scary at all on a rewatch. And I don't know why that is. I guess I just knew what to expect and I didn't the first time, which was a bit disappointing for me, but it's kind of unfair. I mean, I've already seen all the scares before, but it's a very, very good movie. A lot of people complain about how possession movies never do anything different. This movie very much does. And I've never understood why a demon would possess someone just to kind of lay in bed and barf all the time, like in the first Exorcist movie. This demon is hopping from body to body in order to kill people, to be a serial killer. In fact, I'm not entirely sure if it's the demon doing that or if it's just the spirit of Brad Dourif's character or if he was just possessed by a demon. The mythology is still a little confusing to me, but that kind of makes more sense of what a demon would actually do with possession. And this movie does something different and has an amazing George C. Scott performance. At number 3, another movie from Dan Curtis, and what I have decided is my favorite movie I saw at the marathon. This is Burnt Offerings, which I have on Blu-ray. I've not watched on Blu-ray, technically. I just watched it at the marathon on an original 35mm print. It looked absolutely stunning. This is kind of a haunted house movie. I'm not sure if the house is haunted or if it's just the house itself is evil. But a family moves into a house just for the summer vacation. Oliver Reed and Karen Black are the parents, and they have a young son and their aunt, played by Bette Davis. And they all move into this house, and terrifying things happen with the house. The wife gets very drawn to the house, really starts falling in love with it, very sucked in. And Oliver Reed gets very scared. He's losing his wife, and she's becoming something different because of her attachment to this scary house. Really, really cool plot. Maybe a little bit of a slow burn, but I found it consistently interesting because I loved the performances from Karen Black and especially Oliver Reed. He's pretty over the top, but in that great Oliver Reed way that's super entertaining. I just loved. And the ending had the audience I was sitting in just hooting and hollering and cheering. Epic. Awesome ending that I absolutely loved. Burnt Offerings is pretty awesome. At number 2 is technically my favorite discovery of the month because my number 1 is a movie I'd already seen just on a new 4K release. This is my favorite movie from the Mexico Macabre box set. This is Black Pit of Dr. M. I didn't know what to expect from this movie because you can't tell from the cover or the title what subgenre it is. It is about 2 doctors who make this pact that whoever dies first will return from the other world as a ghost and reveal to the other one how to come back to life, to reveal the secrets of life and death, essentially. And one of them does die, and the other one's like, don't forget your pact that we made. And he does return as a ghost and starts this plan of how he is going to take his friend into the world of the dead and send him back in the flesh. And the script for this movie is fantastic. The way it culminates different plot threads all together to lead to this inevitable future that the man has wished upon himself. It's so well done. The script is so good. It's got great performances, very likable performance from a young woman who's like the female lead of this, who I thought was great. And when it eventually gets to where it all goes, it's very creepy, has kind of a monster with amazing makeup and an even better performance. I thought this is like one of the best 50s Gothic horror films I've ever seen. And I'm just so happy I got the Mexico Macabre box set because this was an amazing discovery. And there's just so many, as you can see, really good movies in there. But my number 1 is the new 4K release of Rosemary's Baby. Really don't care for that slipcover though, so I'm just going to slip that off. I haven't decided if I'm going to get rid of that, but and show you the original poster art. Rosemary's Baby is a classic horror film produced by William Castle, which is super cool that he got to produce something this prestigious. And it's starring Mia Farrow as a woman who really wants a baby with her husband, played by John Cassavetes. And she gets pregnant, she gets a baby, and she starts to suspect that her neighbors, and possibly also her husband, are part of a coven of witches that want her baby. Now, some people in the comments of my review on this 4K release, which I did do last month, said that the 4K transfer was kind of disappointing and wasn't really an upgrade from the Criterion Blu-ray. And I'll defer to them on that. I did not buy the Criterion Blu-ray, I just had it on DVD. So for me, this 4K was a huge upgrade from the DVD. But I didn't have a Blu-ray in between, so I understand if people have that to say. But in my situation, I was very happy with the transfer. I loved this release, and I love this movie. It's just it's a classic 60s horror film. One of the horror films that transitioned us from the classic Gothic horror into the more modern horror of the 70s. So that's my list of all my horror discoveries over the last month. Let me know down in the comments below, what movies did you most enjoy watching this October? And what spooky movies are you going to watch today? Let me know. Oh, we got trick-or-treaters. Okay, it's time. I'm coming. All right, see you guys.
Well, it's about that time to go out trick-or-treating, kids, and I sure hope you have a blast. Don't forget to get all the candy you can and hit up all the houses before your parents say that you gotta go home. But do watch how much fun you have, because don't forget, there are things that go bump in the night. So be safe, and don't forget to have a spooky, fun time this Halloween.